Welcome to a new kind of truth. This podcast will broadcast a new gospel that will feel like church, where the pews are filled with the hues of the human condition. Folks searching for something, because we all going through a similar kind of something, all of us looking for a message, so no need to sit in the back. Come to the front, learn a lesson, get a blessing. You probably came to be entertained or hear the choir sing, but you're about to feel the thoughts of a purpose-driven woman. No sugarcoating, all truth, straight, no chaser, here to get down to the heart of the matter. So be prepared to peel back the layers, pour your wine, open up your mind, and let's unwind to the rantings of Dani.
All right, welcome back. We are venturing into the world of religion in this podcast. I am Dani Cook, your host, and we are tackling the world one conversation at a time with the hopes and the intention of changing the world that we live in. So that means taking on some challenging topics, some things that might make you a little bit uncomfortable, but we all know that discomfort is the place where growth takes place. So I welcome you to uncomfortable conversation. Having said that, you know, this journey has been really interesting since launching the podcast in June. The first subject that we took on was racism. And being a biracial woman in this country, it was definitely a challenging topic to dig into. And, you know, I got a chance to interview my mom and another friend of mine and, you know, just really, talk about things that matter, and I have a feeling that we're going to end up going back to that conversation because it's such a prevalent one in this country. Now, after racism, it led me straight into religion. And, it's funny because racism ended up delving into politics, and I'm finding religion doing the same thing. It's funny how all of these really, really challenging conversations seem to all be woven together. So let me just say this. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do so at this point in time. Share it with your friends, people that you think might be interested in being a part of this conversation. You can email me at Dani@therantingsofdani.com. You can also find us on Facebook at The Rantings of Dani, as well as just my regular Dani Cook page. And of course, the website is thisisdani.com. So I want you to participate. I cannot have this conversation by myself. I mean, I probably could because I could talk, but it wouldn't be much to listen to. So I want your feedback. I want your concerns. I want your thoughts. I want your experiences. So please feel free to share those with me so that we can kind of make this conversation what it needs to be in order for us to heal and grow as a people and as a country. Yeah. All right. So having said that, let's just dive right in. So, in the last episode, I took on Christianity as the first full religion episode because it is the leading religion in the world and in America, with over 2 billion people practicing that faith. It was important to take a look at that faith and see, how it's being practiced, how it's being taught, what does its leadership look like? And that led me to taking on megachurches and the pastors that are involved in that and the money that's involved in that, and really taking a look at it finally led me to a place where I just said, where is God in the middle of all this? And now, digging in even a little bit deeper, I find myself asking even more loudly, where is God? I feel almost like Jeremiah in chapter 29. God, what's happening? Why does everybody who seems to be doing bad get blessed? That sort of thing is kind of the feeling that I have. It's this sad disappointment that something so incredibly important as our faith and our practice and our belief system has been turned into a, billion-dollar industry that has infiltrated politics. It has infiltrated the government. It has infiltrated corporate America. And it just seems to be this perversive thing that the more I dig in, the more I find it really, really integrated and, deep-seated into a lot of these places. So I wanted to take a look and give you guys just a little bit of information. The Evangelical Faith Advisory Council to President Trump, this is a group of pastors. I'm actually going to give you their names and some additional information shortly. It's interesting that this entire panel of folks is made up of solely Christians. So I'm finding that in politics, the use of the word faith is becoming synonymous with Christianity. But when we talk about people of faith, well, what is faith, and what religion does that include? I would think that faith includes all religions, but there seems to be this understanding, or this assumptive agreement that faith, when it comes to politics, automatically means Christianity. According to the Public Research Institute, 75% of white evangelical Protestants approve of President Trump at twice the rate of the general public. Like 75% of them approve of him, right? And that's as of March. But evangelical Protestants approve of him at twice the rate of the general public. And it's crazy because when Jerry Falwell Jr. Spoke about President Trump, this is what he said: "I think evangelicals have found their dream president." Am I the only person who finds that scary? Like, what would America think if we had a Muslim president and somebody from the mosque said, a leading person from the Muslim faith said, "Oh, I think Muslims have found their dream president." I wonder how the rest of America would react to that type of statement. I'm going to dig a little bit more into Jerry Falwell in just a little bit, as well as Liberty University and all of that. Now, why does this concern me? Well, today, in fact, just by coincidence, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that they had put together the Religious Liberties Council, right? And there's been bills that have been proposed and in Georgia and other states like that around religious liberties, and usually what that interpretation means is it's the protection of businesses and organizations to discriminate and deny services, goods, products, and so forth based on that person's religious belief system. So probably one of the most well-known and popular cases is the case in the cake baker in Colorado, where the lower courts had absolutely ruled in the favor of the gay couple and said yes, it was discrimination, and then the Supreme Court overruled that. But it's important to understand that the Supreme Court overruled it based on specific things about that particular case, not in general about discrimination. So I want to read you something from the ACLU that is really critical to this conversation, okay? It says, "The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution states that," and I quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." Now, here's what's important. Our founding fathers recognize the importance of religious freedom, so they set forth what's called the Establishment Clause as the very first freedom enshrined in the First Amendment to the Constitution. And here's what that says. There's two complementary protections included in it: the right to religious belief and expression, and a guarantee that the government neither prefers religion over non-religion nor favors particular faiths over others. These dual protections work hand in hand, allowing religious liberty to thrive and safeguarding both religion and government from the undue influences of the other. I wish I could say that that's the case, but the more that I dig into this, the more these things are intertwined. It's a little frightening for me as just a regular U.S. citizen who, is doing my due diligence because I'm doing a podcast and I want to make sure that, I'm giving you guys like real information. And as I keep digging, I'm like, oh my gosh, really? This is what's happening? Like, this is how we're doing things these days? Apparently, yes it is. Yes, it is. So, but that's the whole idea. The preface is not just that you get to practice your religion freely, but there's also a guarantee that the government neither prefers religion over non-religion nor favors particular faiths over others. And I think that we can clearly see that that is not the case when it comes to politics in our country. When it comes to the Republican Party, you automatically get, the Southern Baptist Convention, you automatically get, conservative, you automatically get the right, the Christian, and when people say faith, they automatically think that is Christianity. And that's a problem, if it's not, by gosh, it should be, right? What we're seeing right now, according to ACLU, is increasing frequency, We're seeing individuals and institutions claiming a right to discriminate by refusing to provide services to women and LGBT people based on religious objections. And it takes many forms, including religiously affiliated schools firing women because they become pregnant while not married or using in vitro, business owners refusing to provide insurance coverage for contraception for their employees, graduate students training to be social workers refusing to counsel gay people, pharmacies turning away women seeking to fill birth control prescriptions, bridal salons, photo studios, and reception halls closing their doors to same-sex couples planning their weddings. And while these situations, all of them may differ, one thing remains the same. Religion is being used as an excuse to discriminate against and harm others. That's scary to me because, I think back to a time when religion was used to justify slavery, right? Religion was used to justify, beating people, lynching people, keeping us from eating in the same restaurants. That's a really dangerous place for us to go. And when you think about conflict, so let me just say this, 85% of conflict is just small miscommunication. It's the way that we use words and we think we all know what they mean. And, we all have a different interpretation of language. Got that. An additional 10% of that conflict is miscommunication, but on a more in-depth level. Like it's really going to take some effort to get it resolved, to understand and empathize where each other's coming from. That remaining 5% of all conflict is rooted in our core beliefs, our values, which oftentimes ties back to our religious and our faith practices. So it's incredibly important for us to understand that this being an issue and the way that religion being used in this country puts us in a position where it's almost conflict that can't be resolved. People dig their heels in when it comes to God and their faith and their belief in what's right and what's wrong. And now here's where I think we have an opportunity. So who's to say what's right and what's wrong? And your interpretation of that doesn't necessarily apply to someone else, right? So I know folks who are gay who absolutely 100% believe that they are Christian. They believe that Jesus loves them. They believe that they're going to heaven. Now, I know other Christians who would say, absolutely not, it's not going to happen. My thing is, neither one of you guys is ever going to know until somebody's dead and gone, right? You're not going to know until then. But until that happens, right? And we're not going to know when it does, right? But until that happens, while you're on this earth, who are you to determine what the other person has access to, what their life gets to be? Where do their rights end and yours begin, and your practice of religious freedom? Like that's a sticking point for me. Religious freedom in this country means that we all have a right to our religious belief, but not the right to use that religion to discriminate against and impose the beliefs on other people who do not share them. And that's where we're getting it wrong. So right now, and this is just my opinion when I say we're getting it wrong, to use political parties and positions of authority within the government to push and advocate a particular religion, for me, is a problem. That's when you're overstepping. This is not a dictatorship. This is America. We don't do that here. I say we don't do that here, but apparently we do, right? And it's one of those things where you just wonder how far are things going to go. Now, how do I know that this is a problem within the political system? Well, let's just take a look at President Trump's Faith Advisory Council, right? Well, number one, I think the most important thing to note is they are all evangelical. They are all Christian in their faith. And matter of fact, all of them are men with the exception of Paula White. Yeah, the God whisperer. She's going to show back up in this conversation. And she's here. So I want to just give you some interesting information about the people who are members of this advisory council. I think the first thing, like I said, that sticks out is that they're all evangelical. So who's representing the 1.2 billion Muslims in the world? Who's representing them? Who's representing, the folks who are non-religious but spiritual? Who's representing, our Buddhist community? Who's representing our, Taoists? Who's representing those other people who are absolutely people of faith, right? They're just not of the Christian faith. Who's representing them? in this advisory council? I don't see anybody. And that's, that's something to pay attention to. These folks that are part of this advisory council, they're invited to meetings at the White House. They exchange calls, texts, and emails with administration staffers, and they occasionally will pray with the president. So here's a list of some of the key people, right, that we should be aware are on this council. So I'm going to start with let's just get Paula out of the way. I talked about Paula White and her husband Randy and their church and their money in the last episode. Just as a precursor, let me just run down the numbers for you again. Her net worth is $5 million. She has a $2.6 million house in Tampa, Florida, and she has a $3.5 million condo in Trump Tower. Both of those homes are allegedly paid for through the church's housing allowance. It's interesting because the majority of her congregation is, minority. She comes out from underneath Pastor T.D. Jakes, and she has since backpedaled in some of the things that she said about President Trump. She was on, I believe it was TBN, and she was on and she was talking about, how God had raised up Trump and that anybody who, was against him should be, mindful of God and that sort of thing. And she has since backtracked on that a little bit. But still 100% claims that he's not racist and so forth and so on. So it's important for us to realize she's on the party. She's welcome to the party. Okay. Ralph Reed. Now this gentleman I'd never heard of before. Don't know how I had never heard of him, but I had not. And boy, does he have a lot of interesting information. So Ralph Reed is the founder of Faith Freedom and of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. He's the former executive director of the Christian Coalition. And boy, has he been into some stuff. I mean, he's been in some Indian gambling scandals. He took money he took payments from a gentleman to lobby against the Indian casino gambling. And all this is legal stuff that came out in 2005 and 2006. And there were emails and other evidence that revealed the participation of the Christian Coalition in this alleged fraud, particularly the Alabama chapter of the Christian Coalition, which received large amounts of donations from the casino money. Now, keep in mind, right, the family focus on family was also part of this, right? U.S. Family Network, the Christian Coalition, Focus on the Family, right? They engaged Reed, Abramoff engaged Reed to set up an anti-gambling campaign that included those groups that I just mentioned in order to frighten the tribes into spending as much as $82 million for him to lobby on their behalf, right? So this is a big scam. Now, here's what I think is interesting. Focus on the Family. They actually say that part of the things that they're opposed to are abortion, divorce, gambling, LGBT rights, particularly LGBT adoption and same-sex marriage, pornography, premarital sex, and so forth. What they do promote is abstinence-only sexual education, creationism, adoption by married opposite-sex parents only, school prayer, and traditional gender roles. There you go. That's who's advising the president. Sounds pretty conservative to me. Sounds pretty Christian. Sounds pretty non-inclusive. What do y'all think about that? Yeah, that's a lot, right? Interesting gentleman. Frank Page. Now, I found this guy really interesting because he was, and I say was because he stepped down in March of this year. He was the president and CEO of the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee, but he stepped down, according to him, over a morally inappropriate relationship. Turns out he was having an affair. It was adultery. I'm so not surprised by this because we know that that's a history of the Trump campaign of President Trump. He's not a stranger to adultery, but I guess adultery isn't the same as being gay, or isn't the same as gambling, isn't the same as all of those other things that they just swore they were against. But there you go. Let's have an adulterous affair and it's cool. I think we just had another bishop in the Catholic Church have to step down too for molesting another kid. But there you go. All right. Christian's cool. And I know I sound really facetious right now. I don't mean to, but I was absolutely astounded at this information. Absolutely astounded. Now, this part right here, I want you folks to sit up and pay attention, and for goodness sake, Google it yourself. There's a gentleman by the name of Johnny Moore. He's an author. He's a religious freedom advocate. And here's what I found really interesting. He's a public relations executive who serves as the unofficial spokesman for a group of evangelicals that advise Trump. Now, he's the founder and CEO of a company called the Kairos Company, Kairos Company. And when you go to their site, here's what's interesting. Their site says, if you go to who we are, it says, we are the go-to personal counselors for leaders and those interested in them who want to sharpen their public image to faith-based or general audiences on a national scale. Our team leverages experience from a variety of industries, including politics and humanitarian causes, higher education, entertainment, and more. Holy geez, guys. Do you all understand what this means? Like literally, he's just a PR firm. He's a PR firm. He tells them how to put the spin on it in a way that evangelicals are going to eat up. It's how you know what to say, what words to use to win over the base that you're looking to. Is that not crazy? Here's what it says about him. From one of the world's largest universities to Hollywood's most prolific television producer to America's largest churches to multiple presidential candidates to a quote-unquote under-the-radar board of the world's most successful Christian businessman and a multi-billion-dollar financial services firm, Johnny Moore has been America's go-to advisor when the highest level of success intersects with faith. He works on behalf of the faith community on behalf of those interested in it. Really? He began his career at Liberty University. Do we want to talk about Liberty University right now? Maybe we could. Do you want to talk about? Let's talk about Liberty. Let's talk about Liberty for just a second. We're gonna take a break from the advisory council. Let's just take a dip over here into Liberty University because Liberty University really benefited from the Obama administration's crackdown on for-profit online universities. The administration's crackdown, Trump University came under fire and under investigation, and he settled with a lawsuit, right, for millions of dollars. And in addition, Corinthian and ITT both went out of business. Liberty, though, because they are a religious university, they are a nonprofit. So they did not come under the same scrutiny as all of these other online universities. It's a loosely regulated industry for them. And because they're a nonprofit, Liberty University is mostly subsidized by student grants or loans from the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. So get this, the government is providing the majority of the money, which comes out to the tune of $215 million in net income and nearly $1 billion in revenue in 2016 for Liberty University. So yeah, so is there a separation of church and state right here? Y'all just talk to me because y'all know Jerry Falwell Jr. runs Liberty. He inherited it from his daddy, and he's on the council as well. So is that a conflict of interest? I'm trying to connect the dots, and you all tell me what you think. If Jerry Falwell Jr. is the president of Liberty University, and his salary is $800,000 a year, and the majority of the money that's subsidized to Liberty comes from the government, from the Department of Education and the Department of Veterans Affairs, and he's sitting on the advisory board to the president, is that a conflict of interest? Because I would think that it is. Do you not think that it is? I kind of sort of think that it is. Maybe I'm just crazy. Am I being too picky? Maybe. Liberty hired Baylor's athletic director after he resigned in the midst of a huge sexual assault scandal at the school. Again, I'm going to ask, where's God? Adultery is okay, apparently. Sexual scandals are okay. Pedophilia is okay within the Christian church, within the Catholic community, until somebody speaks loudly enough that somebody pays attention. Is anybody else with me on this? Do y'all see what I'm talking about? And here's the thing, I'm going to say this. I am not against Christianity at all. What I have an issue with is the way that it's being practiced and the way that it's being turned into a business and the way that faith, that particular faith, is being pushed and integrated into politics and into our government. It is not okay. That's not what America is all about. Let's go back to this list. Richard Land is on the advisory council. Now, if you don't remember who Richard Land is, let me just tell you. He was the president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary in Matthews, North Carolina, which is right outside of Charlotte. He's the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Y'all hear those words again, religious liberty. Keep those words at the forefront of your mind and pay attention to the media right now, folks, and see what's happening. He lost his radio show in 2014 over racially charged comments about Trayvon Martin. He literally, he said that President Obama, who was in danger of, or 2012, sorry, President Obama, who was in danger of losing the next election, was using Trayvon Martin to bolster votes. Now, mind you, all President Obama said at the time was that if he'd had a son, his complexion would have looked like Trayvon, and he felt for the family. He could relate as a black man in this country. And somehow that was unacceptable. Got it. He also went on to say, Richard Land did, that black people are more likely to do you harm. So although it's unfortunate, it is understandable that white people would be scared of blacks and that George Zimmerman would shoot Trayvon Martin. He's advising your president. Do you think that he could advise for blacks in this country? Do you think he can advise for people of color? Do you think his faith represents the faith of everyone in this country? His belief system? I think that you all have to start to understand that what you believe is moral and ethically right is simply your version of what's morally and ethically right, and it does not happen to work for everyone else. And you don't get to create laws that solely support what your definition of morally right is. Like, that's not the way that this freaking works, folks. Rodney Howard-Browne is on this council. He's worth about $100 to $140 million, depending upon whose report you believe. Jack Graham is worth $12 million. Ronnie Floyd's worth $9 million. James Dobson's worth a few million himself, right? He was the founder of Focus on the Family, right? He's got a show called Family Talk. Mark Burns happens to be a black preacher. He's the CEO of Now Television. He's worth about $4 to $5 million, right? Now, he's a huge Trump supporter, who's also been called on the carpet for falsifying his biographical claims. He just said, oh, I'm sorry, I overstated them. No, you lied, Pastor, you lied. But I guess that's okay because you're a Christian. It's okay that you lied. Gary Bowers, the president of American Values and Family Research Council, he's also on the council, on the advisory council. This gentleman, I'm just baffled by some of these folks. Robert Jeffries, let's talk about him. He's the senior pastor of the First Baptist Church of Dallas. He has said that Islam promotes pedophilia and is evil. This is literally what he said. According to Talking Points memo, he said, the deep, dark, dirty secret of Islam, it is a religion that promotes pedophilia, sex with children. This so-called Prophet Muhammad raped a 9-year-old girl, had sex with her, end quote. He also called Islam an, quote, evil, unquote, religion, and said that religion was both, quote, oppressive and violent, end quote. He said that Islam was inspired by Satan and was, quote, a false religion. He condemned homosexuality, equating gay sex to a TV outlet. This is literally the quote, like plugging a TV into a 220-volt power outlet rather than the recommended 120 outlet, and added that the action would blow the TV to smithereens, according to Huffington Post. He said that gays live a quote-unquote miserable lifestyle and were predisposed to quote-unquote depression or suicide or alcoholism, and that gay rights will lead to the inevitable implosion of our country, end quote. This is who's advising our president, guys. What about the 1 million Muslims? Do y'all not see that it's all related? The money. I looked up every single person that's listed on this, the key people listed on this advisory council. Out of all of them, I think there's only 3 whose net worth is less than $1 million. The money abounds. And it goes right up to the VP. This is a quote from Vice President Mike Pence. Societal collapse was always brought about following an advent of the deterioration of marriage and family. He called being gay a choice and said keeping gays from marrying was not discrimination, but an enforcement of God's idea. Who's God, Mike Pence? Who's God? Yours? Because I have family members whose God is perfectly okay with their homosexuality. In the year 2000, during his congressional campaign, Mike Pence said Congress should oppose any effort to put gay and lesbian relationships on an equal legal status with heterosexual marriage. He also supported the reauthorization of the Ryan White Care Act only if federal dollars were excluded from organizations who, quote unquote, celebrate and encourage behavior that facilitates the spreading of the HIV virus. He also said only if those institutions provided assistance to those looking to change their sexual behavior. It was an off-the-cuff endorsement for ex-gay conversion therapy. In 2004, he co-sponsored a proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would define marriage as solely between one man and one woman. He voted against, in 2007, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. Really? In 2010, he voted against Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, which allowed LGBT Americans to openly serve their country in military service. In 2012, he refused to say on the record if he supported same-sex couple raising a child together. In 2014, he supported HJR-3, which was a bill to add an amendment banning same-sex marriage to Indiana's Constitution. In 2015, he signed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in a closed-door ceremony surrounded by special interest lobbyists. And in 2015, he also said on ABC's This Week that it was, quote-unquote, absolutely not a mistake to sign that Religious Freedom Restoration Act, throwing Indiana into a $250 million economic panic and putting Indiana Hoosiers' hospitality reputation in jeopardy. And even after his approval ratings plummeted, right, he told the media that he was studying the issue of LGBT rights and whether or not he'd support across-the-board protections for the LGBT community. Do you all think that religion is not in your politics? Do you think that the First Amendment is being upheld and that the government is not favoring religion over non-religion? Do you think they're not favoring the Christian faith over any other faith? It is crystal clear. The facts are what they are. And it's mind-boggling to me that we don't understand that this is an issue, that this is a serious issue. This is not a dictatorship that we live in. This is America. And these Christians, these Christian leaders worth millions upon millions of dollars who are in bed with these politicians and the lobbyists and the special interest groups, shame on you. Shame on you for not representing the faith properly. Shame on you for not adhering to the Word of God you profess to believe in and support. That same Bible that you're toting and quoting talks about not being obsessed with money. It talks about not getting in bed with politics. It talks about not, seeking all of these lavish things that you have. It talks about all of those things. And yet there you are in the midst of it. Shame on you. In the last episode, I talked about all these mega churches and literally the millions of dollars. Kenneth Copeland's worth $760 million, people. And people in Flint do not have clean water. Puerto Rico does not have electricity. Children are homeless. Veterans are homeless. But you love God. Right? Let me tell you something. The biggest religion that America has is greed. The worship of the mighty dollar, That's what drives everything. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. Everything else is smoke and mirrors, folks. Religion, race, all of it being used to divide us. All of it being used as a smokescreen so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And if you do not know that and understand that by now, I need you to Google some things. I need you to Google some things and really get a freaking reality check, because my eyes are being so opened in this process. When you have a public relations guy sitting on the faith advisory board to help them appeal to faith-based audiences across the nation, that's a problem for me. Freaking smoke and mirrors bull. I know I spit out a lot of information, but I wanted to get it all in there for you guys. We're going to be digging a little bit deeper into this on the next go around. Pay attention. Talk to your elected officials. Let me tell you something. Your religious liberties, your religious rights end where mine begin. And mine are just as valid as yours. And the same thing applies for every single person in this country. We have a right to believe whatever we believe. And you don't even have to agree. What you don't get to do is limit what we have access to. Limit how we can worship, where we worship, when we worship, how we dress, who we love, who we have sex with. It's none of your business. And if you're in the process and you're in the practice of trying to manipulate the government and laws to substantiate your religion, you are out of alignment with God. You better read your Bible. Jesus very clearly said, leave Caesar's things to Caesar's and God things to God. If you don't believe me, look it up, folks. We have a problem in this country when it comes to religion. Not enough people willing to do and say anything about it. Call a thing, right? All right, that's it. That's all I got for this episode. Hopefully you guys got some information that you can use. Be part of this conversation. Hit me up again. I am Dani Cook. This is the Rantings of Dani. We are changing the world one conversation at a time, and I know it's uncomfortable. I get it. It's uncomfortable for me. I was raised in the Christian community. I was raised in the Christian church. A lot of these names and pastors, I used to buy Focus on the Family stuff for my children all the time. All the time. It was all they were allowed to watch for a long period of time. And it simply makes me sick, and it breaks my heart to see it being manipulated the way that it is. These belief systems and these ideals. Just to keep us apart so that the rich make more money and the poor don't. I don't know. We got to do better, you know? All right, I'm going to end this thing the way I always do, right? Be amazing, be light, be love, and I will see you the next time.